Oh, we're back, I guess.
Yeah, we're back. We were asking earlier about that whole notion of why writers do that silly thing of you live in a house, there is a basement, and the first person goes into the basement, gets eaten up. In the common sense variation, the next people are not going down in the basement, but in every movie that I've ever seen, they go down and investigate it. And I was trying to figure out why that is the common theme within the writers, because I think most people are going like, sorry, Ralph. You're gone. We're not going to go investigate where you disappeared at.
That's less the case now because everybody has seen everything, especially after COVID, where people just stayed home for years and watched everything. So, um, good horror writing or good movie writing in general acknowledges there's a website called tvtropes.com, which has hundreds and hundreds of cliches that show up in movie after movie. And there's even an ad for, um, I think, Progressive Insurance or one of those insurance companies that makes fun of people who don't get the hell out of there after, when there's danger afoot. Um, but yeah, the cliche of people who stick around, who walk into danger after their friends get killed. Um, that's cliche now. So better horror movies will subvert the cliches. There's a cliche called the final girl, which is that one plucky girl survives. Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, and if I was better on horror movies, I could tell it another.
Ripley and
Yeah,
Aliens.
Alien.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a cliche. Um, a cliche that there are cliches that will make me turn off a movie because if this cliche made it through onto the screen, I know that there's going to be a lot of other crappy stuff. And the thing that, like, I walked out of my big fat Greek wedding because it had a scene where the main female character sees the guy who's going to be her love interest and that is so attracted to him that she does a huge pratfall. And like that director who pulled the jokes out of your dad's movie because that wouldn't happen in real life. Like, I've just gotten sick of the A. It wouldn't happen in real life.
But don't cliches sometimes make a movie? Because there are two movies that I love dearly, and they are full of cliches, and they are definitely classics in my mind and everything. But definitely, I remember Robert Townsend's Hollywood Shuffle, and that was full of all kinds of cliches about the way that Hollywood depicts African Americans and all in that space. And I definitely was a fan of Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles, which was a play on cowboys and westerns and everything, and that was full of cliches.
Yeah, but it knew the cliches and then it spotlighted them to make fun of them.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Hey, Lance, quick question for you and everything as you're painting and doing a great job there of painting Rick and all in that kind of space. But we had another show earlier, and it's a show that is one of our newer shows as well. It's called Dream Stocks, and it highlights some of our local business owners and entertainers, but it is shown nationally. But the woman interviewed, it's a young lady, she interviewed her daughter. That interview actually went well because that daughter was a teenager, as I recall, and everything. But she then interviewed this last week her son. Her son was like, I want to say somewhere around the age of 7 or 8. And I'm thinking that one of the things that your dad probably taught you, which is another cliche, is don't paint, don't do movies with kids and animals because half the time they're not going to cooperate. I mean, you got things like you got animals like Lassie and Rin Tin Tin that might have known what they were doing and were well trained. But I'm imagining that you're not exactly rushing to have cats and dogs painted in your studios because the cats and dogs may tear up the studio and all in that space. But what is your thoughts about animals and trying to take care of animals and young kids? Because I've heard that cliche, speaking of cliches, that those are two of the hardest things to control on a movie set, an art studio, or wherever.
Actually, that idea is a little misunderstood, and let me
Okay.
tell you why. Um, a lot of stars in Hollywood didn't want to work with children or animals because they steal the show.
Right.
So, which is true. Very often, if a child has any kind of speaking roles, they become almost like the supporting actor, and they take attention away from the adults. So that is, in my opinion, the main concern about using children and animals.
Lance can paint a beautiful dog portrait, which I had him do, and then he put the kibosh on any further portraits of pets because he doesn't want to become known as a pet painter.
Yeah, you can make a good living if you want to paint babies and dogs. I prefer to starve though, so I haven't done that enough.
So, which brings us to regrets.
Rick has a topic for the evening, Mark.
Okay, regrets.
I just turned 63 and Lance just turned 62. So we are getting into our.
I know I don't look it.
Hey, it's a sliding scale. I'm gonna hit 61 on July 1st. Don't let the beard and the white beard fool you. But yeah, July 1st, I will hit the big 6-1. So we've got a sliding scale: 61, 62, 63.
All right, so happy 60-year and 11-month birthday today.
Yes.
So, Lance, your regrets.
Well, why don't you start? It's your
Okay,
topic.
all right,
'Cause
so-
I want to know what kind of regret we should be regretting.
All right, well, JD brought up Harvey Weinstein because we were talking about Hollywood people and asked you if you thought he was an anomaly, and you said nah. Though he was kind of, I think, a reflection of an earlier. He had his own monstrous behavior. He probably took it farther than, well, he's in prison for the rest of his life, so he took things pretty far. But also, it was a throwback to the sexually abusive practices of the studio system of the 30s and 40s. But I would like to think that going forward, there will be fewer Harvey Weinsteins. For a guy like Weinstein, for a rapist, when I took women's studies, we were taught that sex is more a crime of power than a crime of sexual release. And Adam Carolla, our friend, disagrees with that. He says it's one of the few crimes of power where you ejaculate at the end.
But back up here for a second, Rick, because I want to see if I'm hearing you correctly. Because one of the stereotypes of Hollywood, and I'm sure it existed definitely when you were on the Kimmel Show, and even when Lance's dad was out there and everything. So you're trying to tell me that for all those starlets that are rushing to LA and rushing even to some degree to New York, even though New York is just now bouncing back, but they do have a Broadway theater and all in that kind of way, that the casting couch doesn't exist as much as it did in the 30s and 40s. Because I talked to some of my friends that are in the acting profession, including some that are aspiring actresses. They give me the impression that it still exists, but maybe they are misinterpreting some of the advances and all in that kind of way. But the casting couch doesn't exist in the year 2023.
I'm sure it does, but it's a little bit more convoluted. It's less blatant, and it reflects people the same way with a horror movie. You don't want to, throw in a bunch of obvious cliches. People making their way through Hollywood, and the guys trying to engage in sexual coercion, and the women who either are or are not willing to go along with it or get trapped in it. It's all a little bit more nuanced because people are a little bit more aware. So it's not that it doesn't happen anymore. I would hope that it happens less, but it happens differently. I mean, there are still probably some monsters out there doing monstrous shit and getting away with it because of power, but it's just it's more nuanced. I mean, if you look at people, if you look at a Playboy magazine from the 1960s, half of the jokes are about incidents that we would consider sexual abuse or even rape.
Mhm.
Like the half of the jokes in a Playboy magazine, or maybe a third of them, were like the co-ed, the young female student, um, you know, walking. She's all tousled, and her shirt is undone, and she's obviously just had sex, and and the punchline, she's walking out of the professor's office, and she's saying she's all happy and talking to her female friend, like, well, yeah, well, I got that A or something. I mean, it would be a better punchline than that, but the idea was that she just went along with sexual abuse, coercion, and everybody's cool with it. And haha, it's a joke. And that's just no longer the case.
Or maybe we just switch directions, because I can name, and I know you and Lance like to talk around political conversations, but I can name at least 2 or 3 people that have used their power of coercion and have done it in the political landscape and everything, because there are definitely accusations out there, and there have been quotes out there about things that Trump has said about beauty pageants and other things. And we definitely know that Bill Clinton used all kinds of coercion with the whole Monica Lewinsky thing. And there are a number of other cases from both Democrats and Republicans. So maybe it's less of it going on in Hollywood and more of it going on in the corridors of DC. Is that a possibility, Lance? So you think maybe our politicians have switched off and they're the ones that are the corrupt ones now in that lane and everything? Because when I hear of it now, it is less in the entertainment lane and more in the political lane, and it's on both the Republican and the Democrat side.
All right, and the one thing about politics is the current office holders are old on average. I don't know about on average, but there are plenty of old, there are plenty of senators and congressmen in their 70s and 80s. Not plenty, but dozens and dozens. And I think blatant sexual coercion is, I would hope, more common among that generation than younger generations for a couple reasons. One, there's more sexual literacy. 2 is there's a freaking mountain of porn out there, where one of Adam Carolla's jokes is that there was so little porn that his grandpa had to lie on a grassy hill and masturbate to clouds that had sexy shapes. So,
Do you know what one of the biggest porn or tools of sexuality was in the African American community for decades and everything? Do you know what one of the biggest tools was in that space?
no.
Jet magazine. Jet magazine had a cover in the middle, but it was not a nude cover. It was usually some scantily clad woman, and I can tell you that there were probably many a African American man or in some cases maybe an African American woman that was having lustful thoughts around those particular pictures, because it was literally the centerfold in the magazine. But it was usually it would be a series of news shots, and then somewhere in the middle of the news shot would be the scantily clad woman.
It's crazy. If you look back at old Ice Capades, I don't know if people even know what that is anymore. It was a skating show. It was people, figure skating.
Mm-hmm.
It was family entertainment in the 50s and the 60s. And if you look at the programs, it's obvious that this was one of the things that the dads would jack off to later, because the programs had a sexy figure skater in some weird skating position that was also a salacious position. And
I'm sure they did it with Life magazine as well, because Life magazine had some very salacious pictures.
The stuff that people had to use to beat off back then, was like 1% as filthy as the stuff that we have today. And also there was just much less of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, Lance, we said we were going to get to regrets earlier, and I'm going to mention a regret of mine and everything. And I want to hear if maybe it's one of your regrets. I'm not sure where Rick was going with his regret and everything, but and about to be 61, and I'm not saying that I can't find a younger woman and still have children or even adopt some children or something along those lines. But I do have my two nephews, and I love and adore them dearly and everything. But if there is a regret, it is that I have not found the woman of my lifelong partnership as of yet, and therefore there have been no kids and all in that space. And as I recall, you also are not married. I can't remember if you have kids or not. So I was wondering, is that one of your regrets, or did you always knew that you were not going to bring kids into this crazy world and everything? Because if I have a regret, it's certain women that I miss. Like, there's the ones that you're like, I should have dated that, but my friends told me that there was no way that they were going to go for me for whatever reasons, and then you later find out that they had an interest in you as well. But by then they've gotten married or had their own kids and everything in that space. So is that a similar style of regret? And I just spilled my soul and told you some of my regrets, but is that similar to you, Lance?
Mark, you regret not having kids. It's hard for me to hear you, but is that?
Yeah, not having kids and not having a significant other, not having a wife. And I know Rick's got a wife and everything, but not having that person in the house. Because right now I'm in my apartment, and like I said, I'll go to bed alone later on tonight after we're done with this show and everything.
You say you live with someone in your apartment?
I do not. I do not.
Okay. Well, yeah. No, I don't regret not having kids because I don't really have much interest in children. But I would love to have gotten married. It just when you're flat broke your whole life, you're not very desirable, I find. The field that I chose of trying to make a living selling oil paintings was really I chose that in the 70s when we thought that women were going to love you for the beauty of your soul.
Mhm.
And
That's a cliche.
it turns out that you have to be able to make a good living, at least in my experience. Besides, maybe maybe there are other things that are unacceptable about me, but I do think that the choice of career is what held me back in that regard, because nobody wants to be with somebody that's flat broke at the age of 55. You know what I mean?
No, I definitely can relate to you on that and everything. And you bring up the notion of materialism, and there are some women out there that are one very career oriented, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have some friends of mine that are very career oriented, but you've also got some women out there that are still stuck on that materialism kind of goal. So if you don't have the quote unquote right car or the right house, so they might be saying, going like, hey, really cool studio that you've got here. Now, where's the rest of the house and all in that space? Because I know in LA there is definitely some materialistic folks, just as that's one of the stereotypes. So I'm wondering, is that something you ran across, even Rick, before you ran across your lovely wife and all in that space?
I didn't move to LA until I had already been with her for years. And I mean, you can be concerned about. I mean, LA's an expensive city, and you need a car, and real estate is. You don't have to be materialistic to be in LA to be concerned about material things.
Right.
Yeah. The truth is that if you're not making $100,000 a year, if you're not in the upper 5% of incomes in the United States, you can't survive in LA. You can't have a family unless your wife works too. But
I'm not even sure you can survive in other parts of the world. I was talking one of the places I work at is a cultural center. It's the same place that I mentioned that Bernie will be at on Thursday and everything. But one of those things that I was talking to is the yoga teacher, because there's a yoga teacher. She's actually going to go to Costa Rica, I think, for a tour of that area and everything, and I think next month or sometime in July. But in talking to her, even here in North Carolina, her rent is going up. So she's going to have to find a new place to rent. Because I think the rule, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lance and Rick, but I think the rule was that you're not supposed to pay more than 20% of your
30%.
expenses, and it's 30%. That was like somewhere around 20 to 30% in your rent and everything. But she was in a 3-bedroom apartment because she does have, I think, a child and a significant other and all in that kind of way. But her rent is going up from $1,750 to $2,500. So 2,500 times 12, that's going to be like at least $30,000 that you got to pay in rent and everything. So that is, if we're talking 20%, 1/5 of 30,000 means she needs to be making $150,000, which she's not making as a yoga instructor. I forgot what her other job is, but I guarantee you she's not making that in either of those jobs.
You're not supposed to pay more than 30% of your income for rent.
Right.
$2,500 a year is $30,000. $2,500 a month is $30,000 a year, which is
Right.
30% of $100,000.
Right. So she's supposed to be making $100,000, which she's not making nowhere near that. I can guarantee you that.
So, but back to why I hope that younger generations are going to be less rapey than older generations. A ton of porn. So if you need to, ejaculate, you can look at just mountains of porn. 2 is the de-emphasis on sex. As more and more things become more distracting and awesome. I think I said it last week, which is that the 70s sucked. Entertainment was generally bad. Food was bad. Clothing, everything was just kind of meh, except if you were cool enough to have sex.
If it sucked, why did it get its own TV show? Because there is that show called The 70s Show. I only saw it like 3 or 4 times, but apparently there was a whole show based on the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, but those people were all. It's freaking Ashton Kutcher. He played an idiot, but I would assume that I haven't watched much of that show. I assume that he occasionally got laid on that show. But anyway, there's more. Life is more distracting and awesome in ways beyond sex compared to 50 years ago. So we know that teens are having 25% less sex than the teens of 30, 40, 50 years ago. There's just a bunch of other stuff going on. Also, in the past 50 years, people have, the average American is much less in shape than they used. There's more tolerance of different body types. And so, like, I see couples, I was never cool enough to have a girlfriend in high school. But I see couples all over, young teen couples all over the place. I don't go out that much, but when I'm out, where I might see teen couples, I see couples that would never have been couples 50 years ago because neither of them would have been cool and attractive enough to get a partner. And that has changed. So it's easier for people, I think, to hook up if they want to hook up. Also, people are more knowledgeable. Like, my friends and I were just idiots, just totally underinformed because we didn't have the internet. Also, we didn't have the internet to help us hook up. You had to go to bars, which you couldn't even do if you were under 21, except for crappy beer-only 18 bars. But, I mean, if you're not cool at school, you're not going to be cool in a bar. So anyway.
Hey, I hear you, but there are all those new tools. My brother actually met his other half on eHarmony. I've had some friends that have been successful on Tinder and some of the other sources out there, even though apparently the different ones have different kinds of functions and everything. I understand, Lance, you'll be glad to know this. I did look at it at one time, even though I didn't do the whole pursuit of all in that kind of way. But there are even sites that you can find that millionaire woman for you and everything. So while you're the poor artist, there is a site called millionairematch.com that claims that will help you find a millionaire that will back your art. So I was just wondering, Lance, have you done any of that online dating, and have you explored this as a way to get the date of the woman of your dreams that will put up with that poverty mindset that many of us artists have? And I consider myself an artist as well.
I personally would never have no interest whatsoever in how much money my partner has. I don't care if they're broke or if they have $1 billion. I'm really only interested in boobs. So very principled about that. But as far as dating sites, I believe they're mainly for women.
They're all bait and switch. What Lance is getting to.
Well, let me get to what I'm getting to. Basically, there's only one kind of guy I've ever seen that gets anywhere on a dating site, and that's a guy that could literally be a male model. Like if he's movie star level good looks, he does okay on dating sites. But basically, you're putting yourself on a catalog for women to go through because somehow they have control over it, and they just pick out the best 5% of us. So it's not a good thing. Also, they make you reveal a lot of things about yourself that aren't that attractive. So I haven't tried those. What were you going to say, Rick?
Dating sites are A, bait and switch because they are B, sausage parties. Heavily, the sites that promise women to guys are mostly BS. I mean, like Russian, Ukrainian brides, any of those foreign, there's a lot of fraud that goes. Like my kid lives in England, and sometimes we have to wire her money for college expenses, and when you send a foreign wire, there's a disclaimer that they want you to read that includes the warning against like foreign bride stuff. It's such a common scam that some huge percentage of wire transfers are lonely, maladjusted American guys being scammed.
I can definitely believe that. It's almost time for another commercial break and everything, so we're going to take that and all along the lines. By the way, Lance, I hate to tell you this, but I do understand that there was going to be a plan for Rick to set up a Tinder page or a OnlyFans page just strictly for you to find that woman of your life. So we're going to have to scratch that plan, Rick, and everything. I know that was the grand plan that we had and everything, but it's not going to work. Lance is not going to go for it, so you'll have to find it the old-fashioned way and all along those lines. But right now, speaking of exercise, we're going to hear about that work that thing supplement and maybe a couple of other things all along those lines. And then when I come back, I've got a question for Rick about his daughter and everything, because I'm thinking that he is one of those hardline dads, but we're going to find out when we come back.
All right.
Recognize the excuses are not valid. They're conjured up, they're fabricated, they're lies. And how do you stop the lies? You stop the lies with the truth. And the truth is, you have time. You have the skill, you have the knowledge and the support and the willpower and the discipline to get it done.
The fruit of everything good in life begins with a challenge. Everything is uphill this required. And it's not going to come to you, and it's not going to fall in your lap, and it's not going to be something that, oh my God, it just was so simple. It's always going to be difficult.
If you want it, you gotta go get it.
This is your chance. This is your shot. This is your moment. This is your time. This is your place.
This is your time to get what you want. Go work that thing with Work That Thing supplements.
Mija. Talk to me.
It's nothing.
Please.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I have to go.
Isa.
Is gonna give you muchas flores. Quítate ese miedo. You'll be a lot more, trust me, yo te entiendo. I know times are hard right now, but I promise you'll be alright.
Hi, Richard. How you doing?
Ahoy, Jennifer. Lovely to see you. I'm so excited we're partnering on Virgin Voyages.
Yeah, I'm really excited too, but I was thinking that maybe before we announce it, that we should decide on my official title at Virgin Voyages.
Yes, and I already have a few options for you.
Okay.
What about something catchy like, don't be fooled by the ship that I got. I'm now Jenny from the dock.
Okay.